One memory chip now costs more than the GPU it sits next to. SK Hynix runs a 71% operating margin selling it. Higher than Microsoft software. 3 companies on Earth can make it. 2 are Korean. 1 is American, and it just sold out 2026. A single AI server rack contains 13 terabytes of this stuff. More memory than the Apollo guidance computers are AM by a factor of 300 billion. Here's the part that doesn't add up. The largest memory company on Earth, Samsung, has been locked out of this product for 18 months. Their smaller Korean rival ate their lunch. The chip we're talking about is called high bandwidth memory, HBM. It is not a new kind of memory. It's the same DRAM that's been in your laptop for 30 years. The breakthrough is how it's packaged. Engineers stack 12 DRAM dies vertically, drill thousands of vertical channels through the silicon called through-silicon vias, and bond the entire stack onto the GPU's interposer. The result is a memory bus 2048 bits wide, instead of the 64-bit bus your laptop uses. Up to 3 terabytes per second of bandwidth from a single stack. 25 times what server DDR5 can deliver. Here's the problem AI created. A modern training run doesn't get bottlenecked by how much math the GPU can do. It gets bottlenecked by how fast the GPU can be fed data. Move the data slower than the GPU can compute, and you're paying $90,000 for a Blackwell to sit idle. Standard DDR5 memory tops out around 50 GB per second. NVIDIA's H100 needed 3 TB per second. There was no way to bridge that gap with a wider conventional memory module. The package would have been the size of a dinner plate. So the industry did something radical. They moved the memory on top of the chip itself. That decision rewired the entire AI hardware stack, and concentrated power into 3 companies. Look at how fast HBM content has scaled. In 2022, NVIDIA's H100 shipped with 80 GB of HBM. The H200 in 2024, 141 GB. The B200 Blackwell that started shipping in 2025, 192 GB. NVIDIA's Rubin R100, sampling at the end of 2026, 288 GB. 3.6 times growth in HBM per chip in 4 years. AMD is on the same curve. The MI300X had 192 GB, the MI350X announced last year carries 288. Google's TPU v7 Ironwood, deployed across Azure and Google Cloud, ships 192 GB per chip. A single GB200 NVL72 server rack now contains roughly 13 terabytes of HBM, more memory than the Apollo guidance computers are AM by a factor of 300 billion. Who makes this stuff? 3 companies. SK Hynix, Samsung, and Micron. The entire global supply. Latest TrendForce data through Q4 2025 puts SK Hynix at roughly 57% of the global HBM market. Samsung at 35%. Micron, the only American player, around 11 to 15% depending on the quarter. Now look at the geography. Korea controls 88% of HBM. The single most strategic component in modern AI sits inside 2 factories in 2 cities, Ikkian and Pyeongtaek, in a country that shares a border with one of America's largest geopolitical rivals. The total HBM market in 2024 was $18.2 billion. TrendForce projects $62 billion in 2026. A tripling in 2 years. Here's the part nobody talks about on CNBC. Samsung Electronics is the largest memory company in the world. Roughly $230 billion of annual revenue. By every metric, wafer capacity, R&D budget, fab footprint, Samsung should have dominated HBM. Instead, they failed NVIDIA's qualification test for HBM-3E 3 times in a row. The root cause was thermal. NVIDIA's qualification requires HBM to operate within a specific temperature envelope under sustained training workloads. Samsung's 12-high stack ran too hot, through too many bit errors, and was rejected for the H200 and B200. For 18 months, Samsung was locked out of the highest margin memory product in history. SK Hynix, a company with 1/3 of Samsung's revenue, took its lunch. Samsung finally passed NVIDIA's HBM-3E qualification in October 2025. Their HBM4 qualification is expected to close by mid-2026, but they are still tracking 1C DRAM yields at only 50 to 60%. Now turn to Micron, ticker MU. The American underdog. 5 years ago, Micron was dead last in DRAM technology, behind both Korean players by roughly 2 years. Then Sanjay Mehrotra and his team made a bet. Skip HBM3, jump straight to HBM3E with 12 high stacks, and qualify with NVIDIA early. It worked. Micron's HBM3E was certified for the H200 in late 2024. Micron has been shipping at full capacity ever since. The numbers are extraordinary. Micron's fiscal 2025 revenue, $37.4 billion, up 49%. HBM revenue is now running at an annualized rate of roughly $8 billion, about a quarter of total DRAM revenue, from 2 years ago. Micron's entire 2026 HBM output is sold out. The Idaho fab, partially funded by $6.16 billion in CHIPS Act money, starts wafer production mid-2026. Why does any of this matter for the income statement? Because HBM doesn't price like commodity DRAM. In 2024, HBM3E carried a 4 to 5 times pricing premium over server DDR5. That premium is narrowing as supply scales. TrendForce expects it to compress to 1 to 2 times by the end of 2026, but the absolute dollar value keeps rising. SK Hynix and Samsung both pushed through 20% contract price increases for 2026. Here's the math that matters. SK Hynix's operating margin in calendar Q1 2026 was 71.8%. 71. Memory has historically been a 15 to 20% margin business at peak. HBM converted what used to be a brutal commodity cycle into something closer to a software margin profile. Behind the three memory makers, a quieter group of companies is also making fortunes. Stacking 12 DRAM dies and bonding them with through-silicon vias requires very specific tools. The hybrid bonder market is dominated by BE Semiconductor, ticker BESIY, with roughly 67% share. Hybrid bonding orders rose 105% year-on-year in Q4 2025. The dicing and grinding tools come from DISCO, a Tokyo-listed company with about 75% global share. Wafer bonders come from Tokyo Electron. Bonder sales tripled in 2025. Inspection of these stacks is the niche where Onto Innovation, ticker ONTO, became a billion-dollar company. Onto signed a $240 million HBM purchase agreement in 2025. Camtek, ticker CAMT, is the second source. Advantest, the Japanese tester maker, runs at a 44% operating margin selling HBM testers. The full HBM ecosystem on one screen, the 10 companies that matter, from memory makers to equipment to materials. What jumps out? The middle row. SK Hynix at 71% operating margin in Q1 2026. Advantest at 44%. BE Semiconductor at roughly 18 to 20%. KLA at 33%. Software-grade margins on physical products. But notice the bottom of the table. Sumco and Shin-Etsu, the silicon wafer makers, are quietly the tightest part of the chain. HBM consumes 3 to 4 times the silicon wafer area per gigabyte versus DDR5. By the time HBM hits 20% of global DRAM wafer input, which TrendForce expects in 2026, the wafer supply itself becomes the bottleneck. What happens next? Most likely path through 2027, SK Hynix retains 45 to 50% share. Samsung claws back to roughly 30% if HBM4 qualification finally closes. Micron holds 15 to 20% and possibly takes share if Idaho ramps cleanly. Probability that Micron's HBM share crosses 25% by end of 2027, in my view, around 30%. Watch 3 signals. Samsung's Q2 and Q3 2026 earnings calls. The threshold, whether they confirm more than 20% of NVIDIA's HBM4 allocation. Anything below that, qualification problems are structural. Micron's Idaho ID1 fab. HBM running above 20% of DRAM revenue by the end of fiscal 2026, the structural shift is real. Chinese HBM, watch for ACXMT IPO prospectus on Shanghai's Star Market. HBM3 yields above 70% and capacity above 10,000 wafers per month, China is on the board. Anything less, China stays a 2028 and beyond story. Catalysts up, HBM4 NVIDIA qualifications closing in Q2 2026. Rubin launch on schedule. Catalysts down, Rubin launch slipping past Q4 2026. Silicon wafer pricing. Every 1% rise in wafer ASP drops about 30 basis points off Micron's gross margin. Upstream, silicon wafers from Sumco and Shin-Etsu, hybrid bonders, EUV lithography. Downstream, every NVIDIA Rubin, every AMD MI400, every Google TPU. They sit downstream of these three memory makers. 1 memory chip. 3 suppliers. 71% margins. Sold out 2026. The pickaxe in the AI gold rush. I'm Big Z, follow me, see you in the next deep dive.